Good afternoon, everybody. Hi, my name is Amanda Walker, and I'm the Director of Development and Alumni Programs here at the Evergreen State College. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon for animation, comics, and graphic novels, a great Evergreen tradition which continues to this day. Yeah. And we are absolutely delighted that so many of our current students have joined us as well. I was going to say, if you're a current student, let us know. I think some of you already did. Great.
You are our future alumni, the greener leaders of tomorrow. Before we get started with the rest of our program, we have some signers here for those of you who may be hearing impaired. We have Yael and Michelle, who are over here. Please welcome them. Wow, I've been here 22 years, and except for graduation, I don't think I've ever seen this many people on campus on a Friday afternoon. I'm Lee Homan. I am the Vice President for Advancement and the Executive Director of our foundation. I'd like to encourage those of you who have joined us for the weekend to take a moment while you're on campus to reflect on how important Evergreen has been for you in your life. Then take another moment to think about the students who joined us today for this seminar. Would you like them to have the same opportunities that you had? If yes, then take a look in your packet. There's an envelope in there. I'm sure you know what it's for. I want to encourage you to think about our annual fund, which is the fund on campus that is the largest source of private donations for scholarships. I'd like you to think about funding for the CCAM, a very important initiative on campus, and we want to make sure that all of our students in the future have access to the equipment that many of you now do with our new CCAM. I also want you to think about our new Gates grant for scholarships. It's a wonderful opportunity that we have for donors who give to those scholarships. We have a dollar-for-dollar match from the Gates Foundation. Many people across campus have given, many people across the country have given, often in the name of somebody who made a particularly important difference in their life at Evergreen. We join you to do that. There are many scholarships already established that you can give to, and if you have a group of people or you yourself want to start one, we'd love to talk with you about that. So, I think,
hand it over. We have to share a mic, you see. So, and the other thing is, if you're interested in getting involved in some way, giving of your time, there's a Get Involved table in the library lobby, second floor, right next to the registration desk. If you didn't see it already, this weekend it's so exciting. We've got 150 speakers who are giving their time, and over 100 volunteers that are helping out as well too. So let's give them a round of applause. Now, I'd like to hand it over so we can get the panel started to Ruth Hayes, a member of our faculty who's sitting right here on the end, and I'll just give a brief introduction. Ruth is an animator herself, producing in analog and digital media. She also creates flip books and other pre-cinema formats. Her award-winning film, Reign of the Dog, A Revisionist History, has been screened internationally. Her flipbooks have been exhibited internationally and are in the collections of the Library of the Museum of Modern Art, UCLA, and the University of Washington. She recently completed On Our Way, a digitally animated reflection on the changing landscapes of Western Washington. So I'd like to now hand it over to Ruth. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda and Lee. This is really fun, really exciting, and I'm really happy to be up here with these luminaries of the animation and cartoon world. We're going to be doing a fishbowl seminar. For those of you who are unfamiliar with that term, it's basically we're the fish, you're outside the bowl, and you get to listen to us. We'll go through some introductions first, and then we're going to have a conversation, and after a bit of time, we'll open it up for questions from you all. And I believe that there's a process of submitting questions, writing them on cards, and then giving them to, I'm looking over here for support and acknowledgement that this is the routine that is going to happen. Stella, is that right? About questions? Yeah, on note cards. So give them your questions to Stella and Amanda, and they'll be feeding them to me, and hopefully that will keep things moving along at a really nice pace. Oh, volunteers are picking them up. And I assume, what, if you raise your hand, they'll raise your hand? Yeah, good. So yeah, I've been here for 15 years, almost, and had the pleasure of working with 2 of our panelists, but the rest of them were predated me. And so we're gonna hear from them first, what they're doing. And I'd like to start off with Tommy Thompson, who graduated in 2011. And we're going to let each panelist introduce themselves, the substance of their introduction, do that themselves. So Tommy, go ahead.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tommy Thompson. I actually graduated in 2010. While here, I made 2 stop-motion shorts. The first entitled Endless Tunnel, which I actually produced in the program MediaWorks, taught by Ruth Hayes. And then over the course of the next 3 years, I produced my second short called High Strung, which I started in the program Media Artist Studio, which used to be called SOS Media, under Sally Clollinger. And then I did multiple independent contracts to finish it with Ruth Hayes again, Sally, Peter Ranlett, and Julia Zay. After graduating, my first professional gig was making a music video for the UK recording artist Kate Bush for her song Misty off her new album 50 Words for Snow. It was produced in London. Since then, I have returned back to the States, obviously, and have started my own company, and I have been playing music and writing several new shorts.
Thank you, Tommy. Our next panelist is Drew Christie, and I believe he graduated in 2007.
Yep, that's true. Okay.
Go ahead.
Yes, that is true. And I took animated visions taught by Ruth, and it was a kind of a class that went over a lot of Russian animation, Eastern European animation, and that really got me inspired, particularly the animations of Jan Svankmajer and Yuri Norstein, and then some of the Estonian animators, and I hadn't seen any of this stuff before, and so it was very, inspiring and interesting to me. And it's not something that you come across every day. Eastern European animation. It's kind of hard to find if you don't know what you're looking for, and so it was very inspirational to me. And so I kind of started making animations inspired by the Eastern European guys, but I'm of course am not from Eastern Europe, so it ended up coming out differently. I guess that's all that I can think of saying right now.
And I'm happy to introduce Megan Kelso to you. Also, she graduated in 1991. Yes?
Yes.
91.
Hi, I'm Megan Kelso. I came to Evergreen as an art school dropout, determined to get an actual liberal arts education so that I could do art about something. I felt very ignorant when I was at art school. So I mostly studied history and political science here. I studied with Jeannie Hahn, Kendall Baer, and Stephanie Kuntz. And then at the very end of my time at Evergreen, I started doing art again. I did an independent study contract with Tom Maddox and Hugh Lentz to make a comic book. I'd never drawn comics. I didn't even really know how they worked. I walked around Olympia telling everyone I was going to make a comic book, and everybody was really impressed and excited. And I finally started it because, kind of out of shame, like, I guess I better make something because I've told everybody about it. So I finished it spring quarter of my graduating year, and I was 23. And it was like I'd come home. When I started doing comics, I knew that's what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. So I'm back, I'm 44, I'm still doing comics. I have 3 books out, and I love them as much as ever.
Thank you. And now I'd like to introduce Craig Bartlett, who graduated in 1981. Correct. Tell us something about yourself, Craig.
Hi, everybody. So I transferred into Evergreen after kind of being an art school dropout as well. So we have that in common. But I was so glad to arrive here. I had done a bunch of comics that summer. Just sort of really, things were sort of exploding for me in terms of graphically doing comics. And I got a job on the Cooper Point Journal and got to publish all my comics that year. And it was just so great to have the venue of this place and this community. And I made a couple of terrible animated shorts as well. Roger Kukas from Portland was teaching an animation class that year, and Thomas Ott was my film faculty, and he sponsored my independent contracts to make the films. But everybody just kind of got out of my way and let me stumble around and do my thing. And I then went to Portland, where I worked for Will Vinton's studios and learned clay animation. And by the end of the 80s, got the job on Pee-wee's Playhouse to do the penny cartoons, which brought me to California. And I had married Lisa Groening by then, Matt's sister, and he said, "Come to LA, it'll be great." And I'm so glad he encouraged us to come, because then I met the people at Nickelodeon and did a series called Hey Arnold for 8 years or something. So is this when we show our clips?
We can.
Yeah, good. I brought some animation because I figured, why not, right? And so I'm going to show 3 short little bursts, none of them longer than a minute. The first is the Hey Arnold main title, just to kind of get warmed up. So let's roll that. So if you'll hold it there for a second. So then I wanted to bring a couple other just things that were very short but somehow describe the show. And so the next little 30-second bit is a song that we came up with about 2nd or 3rd season called Arnold, You Crazy Cat, which ran as a promo on air. Did anybody see that when you were kids? Yeah. There, yes. We have some people who saw Arnold, You Crazy Cat, which was our original pitch for the main title song. It was going to go, Arnold, you crazy cat. And we didn't really get much further than that. But finally, I told the guy who was making promos in the 3rd season, he said, why don't we do that? So I'm going to run a little promo that we ran on air, just that was supposed to be about the show, called Arnold, You Crazy Cat. And it was really fun to make because it's fun just to do songs about a show that describe it. And also, we got to get a big band, like a 24-piece big band, to play this sort of like swinging 50s style version, and then 4 people to sing it in tight harmony, like Manhattan Transfer style. And I always loved it. And so anyway, we'll run Arnold, You Crazy Cat now.
Arnold, you crazy cat, in your natty hat. I really love the way your head is shaped like that. Hey Arnold, push button whiz. Won't you please tell me what your last name is? Swinging with Gerald, while Harold winds and Helga shrines. Yeah, you're Arnold.
That's pretty good.
Nickelodeon's own. Mondays and Wednesdays in the Nickel Ozone.
8/7 Central.
The Nickel Ozone, that's interesting. So if you'll hold it there, that'd be great. I love that line, while Harold whines and Helga shrines ya. I think that's a great line. And then speaking of Helga and the shrines, this last little clip I want to show is, I think, a minute long. And I just wanted, it was kind of at the end of the series, I just wanted to take all the times that Helga had a scene where she's talking to her locket or is, you know, sitting there in her closet with one of the many shrines to Arnold that she built. And so here is a little 1-minute sort of summation of Helga's obsession with Arnold.
Arnold, what a boob. What an annoying little smarty pants know-it-all. What a nerd. What a goof. How I hate him. And yet, I love him. The way he's always thinking of others before himself. The way he feels and cares so deeply. The way those adorably unruly yellow tufts of hair stick out all willy-nilly from that wise and wonderfully weird football head of his. Oh, Arnold, bane of my existence, blight upon my tortured heart. If only you knew my true feelings for you. Only until now I've been too shy to tell you the truth. Too bashful to come out and say that I love you, Arnold. Love you.
All the times that she hit Brainy. Ta-da! So, thank you. So I figured it would be Arnold that this crowd would be more interested in than the show I'm doing now, which is called Dinosaur Train, because that's a show for kids that are like, you know, 2 to 6, and you all basically were more the age to grow up on Hey Arnold, and now you're grown up, and we're in an interesting time of social media and trending and things kind of spiking. So there's a kind of more interest in Arnold for some reason now than there has been for a while, and I think probably for this audience. So, but you know, they're all interesting processes, and I'd be happy to talk about any of this stuff. But that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig. So our next panelist is Steve Willis, who graduated in 1979. Want to say something about yourself, Steve?
Thank you. I actually went all the way from kindergarten to college here in Olympia, so I was able to watch Evergreen being constructed and see the impact it had on this community. I'm one of those people that always drew as long as I could remember, and I was, since I'm a W, I was in the back row, so nobody noticed me, and that was pretty much where I learned. At the time that Matt and I were here, they didn't really have cartoon classes, so we were pretty much self-taught. And then publishing our own work was kind of difficult because photocopy technology was a lot more primitive back then. In fact, my first few comics were on mimeograph. I don't know if all of you know what that is, but Fred Flintstone used it. After I graduated from Evergreen, I got involved with a community of cartoonists who called themselves New Wave, because by that time, photocopy technology had evolved to the point where we could reduce and enlarge and do more sophisticated things, and it really opened up publishing to a lot of people who normally wouldn't find an audience. And we used the US Postal Service as our distribution point, and to this day, I still think of myself as a New Wave cartoonist, and I still love photocopy. After here, I went to the University of Washington and got a master's degree in librarianship, and that is really my field. In the 80s, when I worked as a librarian at Washington State University, I helped establish the first academic collection of underground, new wave, and self-published comics in the Pacific Coast, and it's still going to this day. Thanks.
And finally, we also have Matt Groening with us today. Matt graduated in 1977.
Yeah, I'm the geezer. Yeah, I came to Evergreen in 1972, so let's see, what, 72, 77, yeah, 5 years it took me to graduate. I loved this school. It was, when I found out about it at the end of high school, that there was a public school in the Pacific Northwest that had no grades and no required courses, I said, that's for me. And it was great. I don't know if Evergreen is the same now, but at the time, basically, every creative weirdo in Washington, Oregon, and Idaho gravitated to Olympia, and it was a blast. I got to study with Gordon Beck filmmaking and Merv Cadwallader Greek culture, and with Mark Levinsky and David Powell, really depressing Kierkegaard and Nietzsche, which I don't recommend in the winter. Okay, just no Kierkegaard, no Fear and Loathing, Fear and Trembling in the winter. Anyway, I can go on and on and on. Graduated, moved to LA, started a comic strip in reaction to my life in Olympia called Life in Hell, which I have been drawing for 32 years. And then slightly less long, Simpsons, 22 years or whatever it is. And so I would like to show, for those of you who are not familiar with The Simpsons, just a few of my favorite clips. Can we roll those clips?
What took you so long?
Spiders? We don't have
There was more, but who cares, right?
Stupid spider, afraid of dying? Huh? Oh. Ow! What? Spider poison is people poison? Where's the pain? Oh, there it is. Ow. A spider?
Homie! Time to open the envelope I gave you. Who's up for some exploring? Hey, I'm still checking out Japanese TV. Isn't this that cartoon that causes seizures? Bard, what are you doing? What the?
All right.
Everyone's gone. Oh, how embarrassing. Oh, we slept right through church.
It's not the end of the world.
Oh, no, it's the apocalypse. What? Are you wearing clean underwear? Not anymore. It's the rapture, and I never knew true love.
I never used those pizza coupons.
Why aren't we ascending into heaven? Oh, right. The sins. What? Oh.
Where do you think you're going, Missy?
Dad?
Ooh, I smell barbecue. Hey, look. Ah! Oh, there are the hot dogs! And the coleslaw has pineapple in it! Ah! German potato salad! I'm on the highway to hell! On the highway to hell! Highway to hell!
You know, I also have some Life in Hell comic strips, which I would love to narrate, if you can indulge me for another 2 minutes or 3 minutes.
Please do.
Let's see, what did I do? Okay. Oh, let me explain. So I've been drawing my Life in Hell comic strip, as I said, for quite a long time. Then I got married and I had kids. My kids, Will and Abe, and I started recording their conversations. And instead of having to write the comic strip myself, I just illustrated what they said. And out of everything I've done, this is my favorite stuff. So please indulge my cute kids here. So this is called Will and Abe in King of Monster Island. Dad, we're having the final battle to see who is King of Monster Island. This monster is Ghoul Diclops. This monster is Megavirus Zombie. This monster is Monster Zero from the planet Zero. This monster is Zigular. This monster is Tina. What, Tina? You can't have a monster named Tina. Yes, I do. No, Tina. No, Tina. No, Tina. No, Tina. No, Tina. I'm not playing this game with you. You don't even know how to play it right. Tina is King of Monster Island. Ow! Quit punching me. Well, you make me mad sometimes, Abe. I'm going to tell God to stab you. What? That's impossible. God isn't a human, you know. I know. So God doesn't have hands. I know. Well, if God doesn't have hands, that means he can't hold a knife. Oh. And if God can't hold a knife, how can God stab me? Well, I'm going to tell God to kick you. Okay, the last one. Abe and Will in the dinner conversation, August 8th, 2001, 7 p.m. You guys want to go back to Bali? Yeah. Jinx, personal jinx reversey. Free country, new king, free world, anti-free world. Black magic, white magic, black magic wall, white magic wall, rainbow wall, reversey rainbow wall, anti-reversey rainbow wall, turn reversey, anti-turn reversey, double dog dare, triple dog dare, turn reversey, death spell, resurrection spell, anti-resurrection spell, turn reversey, prison cell, teleport. You can't say it because I already said anti-resurrection spell, turn reversey, enlargement, anti-enlargement, you're shrunk forever, anti-free world, my slave, turn reversey, shrinking all power come to me spell, God destroy all. No! I hate you. Dad, draw it that I won for once. Thank you.
We have other treats that the other panelists brought, clips that I know Tommy and Drew and Megan and Steve have some images too. Do you want to go through those and talk us through them? I know people want to see them. So let's start with Tommy. You want to start? Yeah. So we start with Tommy's clips.
All right, so this is simply just my demo reel to try to get a job. I don't have a job right now, so if anybody has a job, just putting that out
He's a really
there.
good worker.
Yeah, I could work anywhere from like 40 hours to 140 hours a week. Like anywhere in that time frame is cool to me. But this is just little clips from all the shorts I've made of my 2 shorts at Evergreen and the Kate Bush project.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Drew, I think you brought some.
I did.
To show too.
Yeah, this is also, like Tommy's, a bunch of stuff cut together with music over it. And it's a pretty wide range of stuff, but within my own limited world scope of skills and things. But it's a lot of, it's all hand drawn. And yeah, I guess we can just play it. Yeah, so it's just a wide kind of range of stuff that I've done for various things. The little rodent reading the book was for, I think, a recent one I did for the New York Times for a new thing they're doing called op docs, which are like short opinion videos. And that was about a nutria who lives in Lake Washington, and they're an invasive species. And that actually my grandfather, he was one of these people that dumped it in, so it's horribly embarrassing for me. But anyway, so yeah, and there's various things in there, like there was some music videos, and one of the one it started with the submarine being taken by the octopus was done here at Evergreen, and it was performed with live music and live narration, and it was a very fun thing to do. So.
That wasn't Democracy for the Fishes.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't that one. But there's submarines tend to show up in a lot of my things for, I don't know why, but.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And Megan, I know you brought some slides.
I have some images. I don't even know what order they're in. So why don't you show them? Just show them, and I'll speak to them. This is the cover to my graphic novel, Artichoke Tales. Came out in 2010 from Fantagraphics Books. It's a story that I worked on off and on for about 10 years. And it's a Civil War saga that takes place in some other world. It's about multi-generations of a family that's kind of stuck between the two sides in the Civil War. Next slide. This is the cover of my very first comic that I did as an independent study contract here at Evergreen. I took it to Kinko's and made 50 copies. Next slide. This is a panel from a comic that ran in the New York Times Magazine a few years ago. They had a feature in the magazine called The Funny Pages for about 3 years. Various cartoonists got to take a stab at doing a short story that was serialized week by week. I did a story called Watergate Sue that was about a family in Seattle in the early 70s, and the mother in the family was obsessed with Watergate. And it kind of interweaved stories of the family and the events of the Watergate scandal. And, oh, I wasn't done. This is one of my favorite panels, and it's extremely autobiographical. It's actually very closely resembles my mother sitting out watching the Watergate hearings on our really tiny black and white TV. I don't think she was actually pregnant at the time. I made that up. But my mother's here in the audience, so I put this one in for her. I think there might be one more image. This is the cover to my second book of short stories. Like I said, it took me 10 years to make a graphic novel, and all the time that I was doing the graphic novel, I was writing short stories on the side, and I think it's taken until now for me to realize that that's really my form. So I'm actually at work right now on my third book of short stories. Thanks.
And you're still, Megan, you're still illustrating them. They're still...
What?
You're still drawing to them.
Oh, they're comics, yeah,
they're
but
comics.
they're short.
They're short.
Yeah, that's what I meant,
right.
Yeah.
Right, thank you. And Steve, I think you brought some.
Yeah, there are a
things as
couple
well.
of them. Go ahead and put up it. Yeah. I'll just respond. Oh, the 4 states of being: subconscious, unconscious, subunconscious, suburban conscious. This was in a comic I did, I think, in 1982. It appeared in a self-published book called Limbo Olympia. And back then, there was legal size was not obsolete like it is now. I think that's, 33 centimeters in length. Legal size folded was a great format to work in. I think some of your early stuff was that way, too. Yeah, I recently started reprinting this stuff, and they told me they no longer make legal size paper, and I learned about a thing called Project ELF, which is eliminate legal files. So they have to cut it now if I want to, especially. Okay, listen to the next one. What goes around, comes around. I actually drew this one when I returned to Evergreen as an employee. In 1986, I worked in the library here from 1986 to 88, and the Cooper Point Journal talked me into contributing comics again. So I sort of had a second life here as a cartoonist. And also, when I left in '79, I was like Matt, I took the long way through too. But when I left them a big stack of comics, and they just kept publishing them. And they actually published more of my work after I graduated than when I was here. So and that's it.
Thank you. So before as we were organizing this panel, we emailed all of you and all of the panelists and asked them for questions that they would like to hear each other talk about. And one of the questions that came up that I'm also very interested in is hearing more about how your different creative processes have changed since you've left Evergreen, if there are significant changes, if there are things that are really continuous with what you were doing then, and maybe what new influences are at work. You can order them, you can answer them in any order that you want. Or I'll call on you if you want.
Well, I stopped using a typewriter since college. I used to, one thing I took away from Evergreen, I took away a number of things. In fact, one of the amazing things about having gone to Evergreen is how much what seemed to be ephemeral experiences that I had at the time have stayed in my brain forever. For instance, I never had him as a teacher. Richard Alexander, who I understand might be here. Or I don't know if he did. Anyway, he gave a lecture once, and the only thing I remember from the lecture is he said, any theory which describes everything describes nothing. And I've been thinking about that ever since. I don't know exactly what it means, but I like it. Anyway, the one thing, as far as creative process that has stuck with me, in my last year at Evergreen, I had an individual contract with Mark Levinsky for fiction writing, and his only requirement was that I write 40 pages of fiction a week, again, on a typewriter. And another friend of mine, Brad Picorni, had the same contract and did the same thing, and at the end of the quarter, I had, he did a word count on my page, and I had about 230 words per page, and Brad used a smaller type size, and he had 730 words, so he had to write a lot more than I did. It was a delicious moment. Anyway, from just cranking out 40 pages of fiction a week, I got a lot of garbage out of my system. And I don't know, I can't say exactly what it is, but I was a different person at the end of that time than I started out, and better, I think.
So do you do that still? Like, say, I have to do, X number of pages or drawings or sketches?
Well, I draw a weekly comic strip, Life in Hell, every week. I did it yesterday, so that it's usually due on Friday, but I did it yesterday so I could come up today. And every week it's a surprise. I go, oh no, it's due again. This has been for 32 years. I am not ahead. I'm not ahead. Are you ahead? Are you, any of you else working on deadline, are you ahead? No? That never changes.
Anybody else?
So the question was, what about our process was going on for us here at Evergreen and is still going on for us now? When I got to Evergreen, I was pretty far along in my, higher education journey, having gone through art school and kind of knocked around for a while before I finished here. And I remember when I was in art school and doing paintings and stuff, an older artist from where I lived in Washington saw my work and said, you really need something, you need a point of view, you need something to say. And it's not there yet, you're just kind of going through the motions and doing what you think you're supposed to, but you need something to say. And that really kind of stuck with me, and I felt like the Evergreen, my 4th year here, when I was doing the comics, and I was finally starting to try to have a voice and try to do some storytelling. And it empowered me, just the ability to, just the wonderful kind of graphic stuff that you could do here. And it empowered me, and it made me realize, but over all these years that I've been in LA doing animation for TV, it really was the storytelling that was what I wanted to do all along. It's what got me out of fine art and into animation in the first place, and comics in the first place, was that they mixed the word and the image. And then animation, of course, mixes motion and life and music and sound effects and all that cool stuff too. And that's what I'm still doing, and after all these years. And it kind of started here for me. So
that's great. Thank you.
I can talk. So I didn't do any real art stuff at Evergreen until my last year. I mostly studied history and political science. I had to write many papers. I didn't have to write 40 pages a week, but had to write a lot. And then I started doing independent study contracts. And I think what I learned at Evergreen that still is with me and still works for me is I somehow developing your own study contract and then seeing it through, and just having that experience of generating a project on your own and then being required to finish it actually turns out to be a really great life skill. And in a lot of just sort of day job type circumstances I've noticed that I seem less afraid to begin something or to throw something out there other people. And often what happens is just being the one to begin allows other people to then have ideas, and then the ball gets rolling, and then the project starts. And I really do attribute that to my experience here. There's something I remember about being at Evergreen is that it was never scary to begin something. There was an acceptance of that, and I think that really helped. So I wish Linda Barry was here. I don't know her personally, but I know she's a contemporary of yours, Matt. And I took her class a couple years ago, and she teaches an amazing class about writing and memory. But the thing that stuck with me in her class that she learned here at Evergreen. She basically says, like, the class she teaches is what she learned at Evergreen. But one of the things she says over and over in her class is activity evolves purpose. And I've never forgotten that since I took her class. Like, you just need to begin, and then you will figure out what you're doing. And I think nobody ever said it in those words at Evergreen, but I think that's what they taught me. So.
Oh, thank you.
You know, I think Linda's probably the best ambassador for Evergreen there's ever been, as far as just taking, what she learned at Evergreen. Specifically for Linda, it was Marilyn Frasca, who she's basically devoted her life to. And I never took any classes from Marilyn, but my friends did, and Linda was one of them. Lynn Robb, designer, and I've been listening to it for the last 30 years about what they learned there. That was great. Yeah, and Linda is, you can see her stuff online. She's teaching at the University of Wisconsin. I went out and guest taught a class with her, and I was exhausted at the end of an hour, and but she still does it. In fact, I got to tell you, Linda and I went to India together last year. And spoke at a conference, and there is nothing like traveling in India with Linda Barry, because we went to a Muslim part of town, in this one little town, and all the women wearing burqas, and we got out of the car and immediately were surrounded by people who didn't look like us, and either Linda said to me or I said to her, blend in.
Is this thing on?
That's it.
We should point out that Linda couldn't be here with us because she's teaching her course right now. So that's why she isn't here. She's too busy teaching. That's why she's not.
She's got a Tumblr blog called The Nearsighted Monkey that has a lot of stuff that she teaches in her class. And by the way, as long as we're talking about Linda, when we, going back to the 70s, when Steve Willis and I were at Evergreen, there was no comics culture at the time. There was underground comics that had kind of died. There were Robert Crumb and all the underground comics from the 60s had sort of faded out. The hippie emporiums that sold underground comics had kind of died out. There were no more waterbed stores. So we kind of made it up. It was Steve Willis, Linda Barry, Charles Burns, Jim Chupa, who else?
Flicky Ford.
Flicky Ford, yeah. We just sort of made up our own scene and all cartoon for the Cooper Point Journal, and now there's this whole culture in Olympia. That's amazing. It's amazing. I'm very happy. If I had known that it was going to turn into something, we never thought we were going to make any money at it. We just did it for fun. Yeah, so it's really cool.
It strikes me interesting that when I first met Linda, she wanted to be an art teacher. That was her goal. Now she's come full circle. Yeah. She actually attained what she went for.
Right.
So I'm interested in this idea, Steve, you were talking about the paper, the legal paper going out of production and the, not using a typewriter anymore, when photocopying suddenly became accessible and you could enlarge. And I remember that time because I was messing around with that stuff too. I'm kind of interested in how these changes in the really mundane technology, office technology that people use, how it becomes, it's like I think of it as wharf pilings, and the artists are the barnacles that just sort of are opportunistic and hold on to them. So I'm wondering what is happening now? What are the things that are the sort of new but really mundane technologies that people are possibly starting to make art with? That maybe you guys are already doing this, I don't know. But I'm wondering if you thought about that at all.
When a lot of my shorts just play at like little film festivals around here, so the thing that I've noticed is you have all these little independent animators around doing the weirdest techniques, like animating on books, or like things that you like don't normally see in kind of conventional things. So you have all these people, because there's such like an oversaturation with the internet right now, where if I want to learn about some obscure Eastern European animator, I look them up and then I could see all of the shorts they ever made on YouTube that quick. So there's like this extreme saturation where you kind of have to go like, well, what do I want to do, or try to do something new and look at everything that's ever been around. So I've seen so many like artists just like animating with like liquids and wax and just weird techniques just to kind of try to break the norm and do different things. So it's like, it's a reinventing of things that have already been done because the influence is so broad now. Like, you could just look at anybody, any genre, and you just find so many works and just watch them all instantly in one day and be influenced to make something over the next month. So you don't have to scan through a library to get all this stuff. So all this stuff is just like, it's such like a complete oversaturation. It's amazing because then you can look through all these different technologies and say I want to use an old school typewriter, but then I'm going to scan it and digitally manipulate it and then print it onto wax and then melt the wax and there's your animation. So it's like a reinventing of like multiple techniques into one.
And I find that making animation for kids, we as animators are sort of like our cultural archivists anyway. We're just naturally attracted to all this stuff. So we're in the best time ever because of all the access to everything. And we keep kind of bringing back all of our favorite old jokes from bygone eras. And what I love about it is that you turn that on an audience, a new generation of kids. They think you came up with it, which is really funny. You know, they finally see it on, like, I don't know, Apocalypse Now, and they're like, hey, they stole that from. But you know, that's you know, we have all of culture to draw from, and we just, it's because we like it. We're fascinated with it.
We have a question from the audience. This is to any one of you can answer this, or all of you. We've heard a little about the role of the Cooper Point Journal. How did it figure in your life in comics and et cetera, artwork, I imagine, during your time here, if at all?
Let me start. Okay. Having grown up here in Olympia, there was no such thing as an underground newspaper here because the 60s in Olympia was kind of an extension of the 50s until Evergreen came. Then this alien ship landed out here, and they had this school paper, which is about as closest thing we had locally to, you know, an alternative paper, and it was called The Paper. And after a couple of years, it became the Cooper Point Journal. So that in itself had an impact on me. And then it supplied a venue for us to find an audience, which back then was a lot harder to do. And the first person to start a comics page was none other than Matt. And I thought he was very generous and opening up the page and encouraging, and he was a great patron to the rest of us.
I had a very interesting editorial policy. I'd print anything. So yeah. that was, in fact, any letter to the editor, didn't matter. I said anonymous, anything. And Linda Barry used to write letters to the editor, but sign them with my name. And I had to print them, so. She said, I'm sitting up here in the Cooper Point Journal office with the rifle I checked out from Media Loan. Yeah. And signed my name. And to prove that I was free, I printed it.
There had been cartoons prior to Matt being the editor, but they were pretty sporadic, and Matt really provided a structure and a real platform for a whole bunch of us at once. But it didn't really become apparent to me that Evergreen was a kind of a hotbed of cartoonists until this book came out after I graduated called Tales from the Steam Tunnels, which I believe you had a lot to do with, Craig.
Yeah, we just wanted to have something that we could sell for $1. So at the end of the year, we made Tales from the Steam Tunnels, and we drew from the rich already. Even though it was 1981, we already had a rich heritage of comics. So Matt, Linda, Charles Burns, and Steve, all your comics were made an appearance in the.
Yeah, that was really the first indicator I had that something was going on here, cartoon-wise, that was a little different.
I think we printed it on legal-sized paper, too.
I think you did.
Well, one thing about making comics on yourself, I will just say that one of the delights of making comics in the 1970s, one of the hard things about legal-sized paper is it's really hard to get that staple in the middle, right? You need a saddle-stitch stapler, but if you can't afford it, if you live in the 70s, you put your comics face down on your shag carpet, and you put the stapler through into the shag carpet, and you can. That's how I did it. Those days will never return.
By the time I got to Evergreen, the comics page was very well established, and there was very much a sense of Evergreen having this, if not comics tradition. It was a friendly place for comics. Like, we all knew about Linda and Matt and Charles Burns and Craig. And there was like a library manual or some publication the library put out that Linda illustrated. I can't remember the specifics of that, but that was still being reprinted when I was here in the late 80s. And when I was here, the comics page was edited by a guy named Edward Martin III, who is a cartoonist and was a great ambassador. And he heard this rumor that I'd been telling people I was going to do a comic, and he collared me one day and said, "I hear you do comics. Could you do something for the Cooper Point Journal?" At that point, I had not done a single comic. I'd still just been bragging to people about this project I hadn't started. So having Edward, collar me and ask me to produce something really helped me get going. And the stuff I did ultimately as my mini comic Girl Hero first appeared in the paper, and it was just an amazing thing to see my strip on an actual comics page. It was really cool. So I don't know, is the comics page, is that still happening in the Cooper Point Journal?
Oh, yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. Woohoo!
I did those too, and I would always do these political ones that weren't very good, but I think what helped was I was taking a lot of, when I first came to Evergreen, I was taking political economy and a lot of classes like that, and I was trying to work drawings into all of my papers, and I was turning in like everything with like drawings, and then I started to realize, wait, maybe I should actually, I like doing this more. I can still read, these political economy books, but I don't anymore. So I think that's one thing that always sticks out in my mind for my time at Evergreen, is synthesizing a lot of information, different types of information from different realms of study and things like that into an animation or a drawing or something like that. So it's not just about the drawing so much for me. As I like synthesizing information through it.
Drew, I don't know if people noticed it, but in Drew's footage that he showed, there was it's a lino cut of a cityscape. It's the piece about the Seattle fire, right? Yeah. And I found that when you first showed me that, I thought that was so amazing, that connecting the printmaking practice, doing these lino cuts and using it as an animation background and then animating on top of it. I thought that was a really interesting thing. And it seems like there's this really beautiful connection between animation and the comic tradition beyond just the obvious that you have comic characters or cartoon characters. It's also something about the tangibility or the actual material of making the image itself that comes across. And so I was really glad that you included that in your clip.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, that was, like Ruth said, those lino cuts, and I'd never seen an animation that was with lino cuts or prints, and I always try and think of the most time-consuming way to do an animation, as if animation weren't time-consuming enough. I always try and think, I'm like, oh yes, embroidery animation, scrimshaw animation,
How can I make this harder?
Yeah, exactly. So, I was telling my girlfriend, who's also an animator, her name's Amanda Moore, and I was telling her, I was going, I really want to do a woodcut or a lino cut animation, and she's like, oh my God. But yeah, so I think it's a process thing. I think a lot of animators and artists and stuff, it's a process, it's like the old legal paper. It's just, it's, I don't know.
And Tommy, you've done, your work is very, very, but at least the work that you did at Evergreen was very, very process-oriented. And I don't know, are you still heading in that direction with your work, do you think?
Yeah, like all the stuff I've ever done has always been like lock yourself in a room and just like make something. I'm really fascinated with the idea of what people make in their bedrooms. Like there's a lot of musicians I listen to that record completely on just like 4-track cassette tapes in their bedroom, and this idea that you have this single person somewhere that you never see because they're always inside, but they make this thing and then you look at it or listen to it and you're like, that's exactly how I feel. How did this person connect with me when I've never seen them, and they never connect with other people because they're in a room by themselves? Like, so it's like, how does that work? So I'm really fascinated with the idea of like the piece I did, High Strung. I was basically my entire Evergreen career just in the Linda lab, which is Linda donated a bunch of money so we can get gear, and I just locked myself in there and just spent 3 years making this animated piece about being in a box, and I was in a box. So this kind of idea of like, you make this thing and you become part of the process so it reflects what you're doing. And then hopefully that connects with someone else that is also just like hanging out in their bedroom and doing their own thing. And they're not connecting with other people because they don't go outside much. This idea of like, we're in 2 different locations that are completely like secluded, but somehow we connect with each other and that means something to us. So. I guess.
It's kind of ironic, too, because then the TV animation world requires this huge number of people that have to collaborate. So those 2 things seem to be really opposed to each other, and yet, you can go that way, too.
Yeah, and they're actually, but I would imagine, because I haven't done TV animation myself, but I would imagine that even with that, there's still an intensity that is, you may be locked in a box with a bunch of other people, but you're still sort of locked in a box until you
Yeah, even right next to each other. Yeah.
So here's another question from the audience. When you think about subject matter for your animation or cartoons, what sorts of topics do you think of, and how do you think about the messages that you send?
Well, I guess all the stuff I come up with, it's all based off I never get an idea when I sit down with a piece of paper at a desk and try to write something. That's usually like when the most like horrible stuff comes out. But I'll be like washing the dishes or something and then get an idea, and then I write it down on this like yellow notepad I have. So I have this yellow notepad that just has thousands of random ideas, and it's like extremely hard to go categorize through it and try to find stuff out of it again. But it's all stuff just drawn from life that seems to present itself to me. I don't try to think of stuff, I let stuff come to me. And then when I have this kind of bushel of ideas, I can kind of pick through things and say, oh, I really like that, what could I do with that? Think about it for a while, and then go back and revisit it. So it's like it's a calculated process over a longer period of time instead of just like writing something.
I have a very similar process, but instead of using a yellow pad, I use old library cards. Another obsolete technology.
Very analog.
Thank you. But I don't really worry about the message or any of that. I stopped worrying about that a while ago. I just do it. Whatever comes out, comes out.
For me, when I have been doing kids programming for so long, that it seemed to be about trying to dig up the earliest childhood emotions and sensations and turn them into stories. And often it would be just the germ of something that happened to one of us. And the rest was made up and not at all true or real. But that's because we can't, we have to embellish and elaborate so that it's more entertaining. But it's about being able to access your inner child, which is what they're always looking for from us. They want the inner child.
And is there any pressure or influence from producers to have a certain kind of moral tone in the work that you're producing for kids?
I don't know. It seemed like there was a moral tone to Hey Arnold, but no one asked us to do it. It just sort of came out. It wasn't like we were trying to tell people to be good or anything. It's just more like stories tend to have conflict and resolution, and therefore there's some kind of takeaway from it, some kind of learning from it.
I've always, with my work, just thinking about it just now, is that I'm trying to entertain part of the audience and offend another part of the audience. But the best is if you can make your audience laugh. The people that you're offending, you make them laugh in spite of themselves. My only example, this is not a great example, but a few years ago when Will, the angry kid in the cartoons, he decided that I was no longer funny. And he said, "Dad, you are not funny anymore. There is not a single funny thing that comes out of your mouth." And I said, "Boop." And he fell on the floor laughing. So, but when I was at Evergreen, we with the Cooper Point Journal, we tried to stir up trouble, and we did. Dixie Lee Ray was the governor.
She was governor when I was there too.
And we covered the inaugural ball, and we called it oil slick tuxes and all this kind of snotty stuff, and because she wanted to bring oil tankers into the Puget Sound, unbelievable, right? And so we made fun of. We did a lot of controversial stuff. We made fun of. Remember too, these are different times. I was talking to Steve Willis earlier today, and reminiscing because he grew up in Olympia, and I'd remembered he would not eat at a local restaurant, which is no longer here anymore, the Brown Derby. Some of you may remember. Why, Steve?
They wouldn't serve me because my hair was too long. Then Evergreen came, and suddenly they started serving people.
Yeah, it had been made safe for hippies by the time I got here.
Yeah. I just have to say this for the few people who remember: order of bread. So that was for Lawrence. Okay, so we tried to stir up trouble here at Evergreen with the Cooper Point Journal, and we succeeded beyond our wildest dreams when we did a parody of the Daily Olympian, which we called the Daily Zero, and because at the time the Daily Olympian was not pro Evergreen. I see the logo on the scoreboard there, but back in the day, they because the Republicans were always condemning the school, and somebody called it in the legislature a haven for hippies, poets, and revolutionaries. Why do they call it Red Square? All that kind of stuff. So anyway, we made fun of the Daily Zero, and there's a lot of offensive stuff in there, but I think the thing that really got people really mad, at least a few people. There was a local burger place in town called Bob's Big Burgers, which had a biblical quote on the marquee, that changed all the time. And we just did a fake ad called God's Big Burgers. And that made a lot of people mad. Oh, and then I sent copies of the paper to the editors of the Seattle Times and the Post-Intelligencer and the Portland Oregonian, and my parents actually knew the people that ran the Oregonian, and they told my parents I would never get a job in journalism in the Pacific Northwest.
So you moved to LA, right?
Yeah, that's right.
I remember after that Daily Zero, the Daily Olympian had an article about you, and I think I remember the reporter said, "You'll never make a living doing this."
Oh, but can I rave about Evergreen some more? One thing I was just thinking about is that one of the great things about Evergreen, and this is actually true of LA too, is that people define themselves by what they wish they were doing. It's not people at Evergreen haven't settled down and haven't given up. The idealism is there. It's like in LA, there are no waiters, they're just actors, and all that, right? Well, same thing in Olympia, same thing at Evergreen. I really love that, and I love the fact, I'm assuming it's true to this day, but that students are given responsibility and freedom. When we started at Evergreen, students ran the art gallery. Does that still happen?
There's a student art gallery
now,
right?
Linda Weinman ran the art gallery, and Linda Berry did too. Linda Berry for the art gallery brought in hula dancers. It was amazing.
I think when Linda.
Oh, but I'll say, by the way, one other thing. It wasn't all great. There were a lot of projects that just didn't really work. There's some animated films that are not so good, some cartoons not so good. The project that was not so good that I worked on peripherally was a documentary, a black and white documentary about the Olympia bus station. And it was a half-hour long, cinema verite, no narration. And the high point was the announcer saying, "Now coming in from Yakima." And that was the most exciting thing. I wonder what happened to that documentary.
I think Linda called herself Plex when she was, because of all the plexiglass, when she was head of the art gallery.
Okay, I have another question from the audience. What do you think a dream animation curriculum would consist of? I hope that's not one of my students. It's just...
Yeah, clean house. Start over. I don't know. I mean, what really mattered to me when I was casting about and didn't know what to do, and I didn't know anything about Hollywood, or I didn't have any kind of end game at all. I just wanted to. I had decided by that point I wanted to instead of being a painter or something, I wanted to make things move and be an animator. I was just, what really appealed to me, and I would hope would stay the curriculum here forever, was that there's the freedom and the just starting things that you talked about, just the ability to come in and just throw something down and get going in an atmosphere that's not going to censor that or condemn it, and just be free to make stuff and sort it out later, find out later what it was about, why you did it, and just do. So that was what was going on when I got here, and I hope it's still going on.
I didn't study animation, nor did I study comics, because I was busy doing history and political science. But I really think, that's what I took from Evergreen, is there was so much intellectual rigor here. The professors I worked with, most of them had come of age in the 60s and had been, really affected by the revolutions of the 60s and just were incredibly serious academics. And I really feel like, Matt talking about reading Kierkegaard in the winter and everything, I think that's one of the best things about Evergreen, is that you have the chance to pursue that kind of hardcore liberal arts intellectual education, but at the same time have support to do all the weird stuff, and then, you know, find a way to mix it all together in your own way. And what I feel like I hear everybody here saying, no matter how kind of silly and out there, you know, your work might get, or about pop culture or whatever, there was this kind of core of seriousness that maybe happened to you a little bit along the way at Evergreen that you can't completely shake. So, I mean, I came here because I wanted to actually learn some stuff, not just make art with nothing of substance in my brain. And I mean, do think that can be a problem at art schools, you know, that the kids aren't being educated very well. And I think that's not true at Evergreen. I think you're expected to get educated while you're making your cartoons, and I think that's a good thing.
As far what I would like to see in an ideal animation course, as probably happens here, you don't just study animation. You don't just study cartoons. You study cinema, you study fiction, you study whatever. You study all the things that you make animation about. I wish I could come back and do it all over again, because it was so much fun. I had so much fun at Evergreen.
Matt. You can come back.
I will. But I missed Evergreen. I loved Evergreen so much that when I graduated, I still hung around. I got a job during the summer cleaning out the dorms and the mods. And
there's the dorm cleaners over there.
I take great pride in having cleaned, I don't know, 150 ovens in various community kitchens, and I'll tell you something. Here's one thing too. Are cats allowed in the mods? No. Okay, well here's the thing. Okay, so we cleaned out the dorms, and that was miserable, but we saved the mods till August. And the cats were gone, but their fleas were still there. And oh my gosh, there's nothing like being down on your hands and knees, cleaning with toxic, fluids and horrible things, and then being covered with fleas. It was miserable, and that's when I left for LA.
So after that dream animation curriculum, if one wanted to make it in LA, would those things, the things that the students would have gotten from that here, would that get them in the door? What kind of advice would you give to kids who are headed in that direction?
Well, it seems to be that as far as writing goes, that writing is based on just having a memory of drawing on a million different sources of things that you learned, that you supposedly studied in school. So it's so you don't have, even though now, I mean, at the time when I started out, you couldn't readily access the internet and find out all this information. You just have to have it in your head. Now it's a little easier. In fact, we spend a lot of time at The Simpsons looking at YouTube, in the writer's room, and occasionally do some work. But yeah, it's knowing, having a reservoir of knowledge to draw on that you don't have to look up, that you can just access right away. And the other thing is, at least in my area, you got to know how to draw if you're an animator, and it's hard. I can't do it. I could not get a job animating The Simpsons. I can't draw the characters on model. So luckily I created them.
Yeah, it is interesting. Any method that gets all those first million bad drawings over with and behind you, so you can get to the good ones, that would be the thing. Just to spend your time that you're still a student drawing and drawing and drawing, so that you just get to the better stuff, you know.
I mean, that's like writing 40 pages a week. Only
Yeah,
maybe doing
when Matt said
week.
that, that's what made me think of it. Was some old animator said that you needed to do a million bad drawings before you got to the good ones, and you know that number. People talk about the 10,000 hours, or you know, all those things are random, but they're worth thinking about just in the large sense of just don't be precious about your work and get a bunch of work behind you. And something like animation that requires so much work and drawing that's a perfect metaphor. Just get the 10,000 or a million or whatever behind you.
Were you going to say something, Tommy?
No.
We have another question. We have lots of questions from the audience. This is a good one. What was the worst comment you ever got on an evaluation?
This wasn't an evaluation, but it was a conference or a meeting that I was having with the sponsor of a independent, well, a group study contract that I was doing. It was the fall of 1989, I guess, or maybe it was around there when all of the Eastern Bloc countries were breaking away from the USSR and the Berlin Wall had fallen, and we were going to try and get to the bottom of all of this, me and my group contract. And I had this meeting with our sponsor, and she said, Megan, I'm going to tell you something that might kind of hurt your feelings, but I need to pass this on from your fellow group members. She said, you have this habit in seminar of kind of absorbing everybody else's ideas and then kind of reproducing them as if they're your own. She said, Megan, you have an amazing ability to synthesize, but you hurt other people's feelings.
That's really useful in Hollywood.
I've never forgotten that. You know, it was sort of a compliment, right? Synthesize, that's good. But so I'll never forget that.
But do you still do it?
I think I can't help it. Yeah.
It wasn't the worst for me, but I'll confess something. My first year at Evergreen was a bit of a wash. I was in a program called Image and Idea, Image and Idea, and we studied film mostly, and I goofed off, you know. And when I told you about that bus documentary, I sort of stood around. You know, I didn't do much on it. And for my final evaluation, you know, you get your written evaluation, then you go in and you have the in-person, you know, conference and stuff. And Gordon Beck said to me, he said, "Do you really think you deserve full credit?" And I said, "Yes, I do." And I got full credit. Now, Brad Picorni, who directed the documentary and worked his ass off, he went in there, he asked him the same thing. He goes, you know, I could have tried harder. I guess half credit. And he got half credit. Yeah, he wanted to kill me. So I guess that was his worst evaluation. Okay, well, if you don't, I'll tell my other one. My other one was my final evaluation at Evergreen. Again, the guy, Mark Levinsky, who made me write 40 pages of fiction a week. Also, by the way, Brad Picorni did the same thing. I'm telling you, this is another story at Brad's expense, but he's a nice guy. He doesn't care. First of all, Mark Levinsky told me he went to the blackboard and look, he had my stack of short stories, and he drew a formula on the board, and he said, "This is what you do in every short story. This is the formula." And it was a very simple formula, which I do not remember what it was. And then he said, "You do what you do adequately well. Now you have to ask yourself, is it worth doing?" And I said, "Well, what is that?" And he raised his hand. He wouldn't say any more. And that has haunted me since then. I think, well, it's adequate, but is it worth doing? You know, that's my thing. Anyway, what he did to Brad, he took Brad's 40 pages of fiction, 40 pages a week of fiction, and he said, "Go get me some scissors." Come on, wait on. It's not the worst. And then Brad said, "Well, those are some scissors you have right there." He goes, "No, those are my scissors. Go get some." He had to go get some scissors. And he said, "God, this may be a bad story. I want you to cut out all of the bad fiction and give me the good fiction. You may end up with 1 page. You may end up with 200 pages. You may end up with a single word." And Brad actually said it was the best thing for him. And he started out, I got to tell you, he was not a good writer to begin with, but at the end he was a great writer, and he ended up writing for the Boston Globe, and he's a great writer. So that worked for him. But that was a hard evaluation, I think. Yeah. Oh, by the way, after we got out together, he said, "Hey, did he make you get the scissors?" I said, No.
I
would say for me...
Are teachers nicer now?
I've never really had a bad evaluation, but I think they always felt bad for me because I always killed myself to make these things. So I'm just in a room not eating or and not sleeping. So I come to their office almost dead, and they're just "Go get some sleep.
Just don't die in my office.
Just don't die on me. Finish school." And then, so those were my evals.
I would say for me, it wasn't an evaluation here. It was the older artists who told me I didn't have anything to say. That was my similar kind of thing that needled me and bugged me for years, and that probably made a bunch of stuff happen just because my work was so unsatisfactory to this mature, successful artist. So I was like, oh God, I got to do something about this.
I've actually had some experience. Yuri Norstein came to Evergreen a couple of years ago, and when he was here, he actually looked at my work, and he said, "The motion was really good, but it doesn't contain any life, and it doesn't show me any emotion." And then, after I finished the entire piece, that's just what's haunted. Every time I watch that, I feel like that character isn't alive. It's just a puppet that's moving. So it's this really haunting, wow, I took 3 years to make a little square move around on the screen, and everyone just has to look at it and sit there for 13 minutes. And when I was over in London, I visited Aardman Studios. They do Wallace and Gromit. And I had the lead animator there, and he watched my stuff too. And he basically downright said, "You're not good enough to work here, but you might be. You just have to work on getting more life or emotion out of your characters." So those things have been what I've been trying to achieve now. So I guess those are my hardest criticisms that I've been trying to deal with.
I'm so sensitive that I don't think I actually read any of them because I was too. I'm serious, or I blocked it out of my memory or something, which I also do, but I don't remember actually reading any of them because I think it probably would have crushed me if there was anything slightly negative or constructive even. I don't even want that.
I guess the worst one I had was in the summer of '77 when you were cleaning the muds in the dorms, man. I was in an anthropology class, and we all got an identical evaluation. The only thing different was our name at the beginning. So it was Steve has completed the, we all had the same. That was actually worse than a negative comment because at least it would have responded to me as an individual. So.
Yeah, that is pretty bad.
Yes.
Why didn't I think of that? Do any of you have any advice for the young artists in the room? Other than what you've already given them. Writing 40 pages a week or drawing a million drawings. Draw more.
Well, I would say if I could do it over again, I wish I had kept a regular journal and kept it and kept it and kept it and kept it and kept going, because it would be great now. Because at the time, I mean, being at Evergreen at the time felt like it wasn't that dramatic, and oh, this is not worth documenting, and now I really wish I had. So one thing, keep a journal. Number two, finish your work, whatever it is, whatever the project is. I have tons of unfinished projects, and there's nothing. You don't have anything to show for an unfinished project. But even if it's not the greatest, having it end is a really good thing. So you can then let it go and move on to the next thing. But finish your work.
Ooh, yeah, that's a good point. Having it end. I learned from a bad experience that things need to end well. A lot of times at the end of a job, people can kind of peter out and just sort of like phone in the end of their work, or just leave in a huff. And it's a very small world, actually, the world of TV animation. And if you can possibly, endeavor to have your work end well, then when you see those people on the next time around, it will probably be a good memory instead of a bad one. So that's, what goes around comes around really applies to our business.
Yeah, so it's not just finishing the work well, it's finishing
the whole relationship well.
Yeah.
And what Matt said about journaling is right too. Whenever I'm talking to somebody and they're going through really interesting times that are maybe really hard or disastrous, I say, are you keeping a journal? Because later it'll be very interesting to read about. And I read my journals from 10 years ago and I go, God, what an idiot. I was so wrong about all the following things, but it's really useful for me to see how off I was and see if there's anything I can salvage from it. Because if you're writing a journal, you're being pretty honest, hopefully. God, if you're writing a journal that isn't honest, that's really weird. But it's very useful to see the earlier, stupider me and try to learn something from it.
I would add to Craig, don't burn bridges. In Hollywood, I offended an executive at Fox who hated Futurama, and I was a wise ass. I said, how do you treat people who make you less than $1 billion? And then he became the president of the Fox network, and put Futurama on at 7 p.m. on Sunday, and the slogan for Fox was, "The fun begins at 8." So, there you go.
It's your bad evaluation. Well, I would suggest finding a community of cartoonists and getting involved with them. In our case, we had a little bit of that with the Cooper Point Journal in the 70s, but later I was able to, through correspondence with the New Wave Network, with hundreds of cartoonists. But here in Olympia, you've got a great opportunity. This is a cartoonist-heavy town. We've got the Olympia Comics Fest coming in a couple weeks, where the creator of the comic is there actually selling it or trading it rather than some dealer. And we have a Danger Room here, which really promotes self-publishing and self-created comics. So if you're here in Olympia, I would suggest getting into that scene.
Yeah, I would reiterate what Steve said about finding a community. And it's funny because when I was listening to you, Tommy, talk about being inspired by what happens when you're alone in your room doing your work, there's that, but then there's what Steve's talking about, that like knowing that there's the other people in their room doing their work, and occasionally finding some way to get together and share it, or even just to kind of know that they're out there. It's like it's a combination of collegiality but also competition, because I mean, whether you want to admit it or not, I think a lot of us have a sort of competitive spirit in us, and just knowing that other people are producing stuff can sometimes spur you on. And another thing I would say, I mean, yes, it is good to finish a project, that we all hope to finish projects, but if you can't, just put it away for a while. Start something else. Don't destroy it. Don't throw it away. Just put it away. And then, you know, come back to it later, and you might, you know, even a year later or more than that, it might be totally clear to you how to solve that project with a little passage of time. That's happened to me over and over.
Yeah, that reminded me of the projects that have happened for me in the last 10 years. Both had gestation periods of 10 years or more, and they were ideas that I pitched and no one wanted. And you could right there say, well, no one wants them, so they must be no good, and I can just throw this away. But I never throw anything away. And I lose stuff, but I don't throw it away. And the show Dinosaur Train was something I thought of when Matt, who's here somewhere, my son Matt is in the audience, I believe, right in front of me. There we go. He was playing with dinosaurs and trains when he was 3, and I got the show picked up in 2008, so that was about 16 years later. And that can happen. It just sat there and nobody wanted it, and finally the time was right. And the show that I'm just starting a pilot on now for PBS is an idea that I started 10 years ago. That, you know, it was a failed project, nobody wanted it, and I just put it away and waited until somebody was ready for it. So it's unfinished projects can be just sitting there waiting until they get a chance. And you know, sometimes we can make a decision to, oh, maybe this isn't, maybe this is a short story and it's not an animation, or maybe it's a comic and not a. There's a lot of different ways that it can finally come to life. But so yeah, so don't kill any of them.
I totally agree. Just like continue making stuff, even if people don't necessarily like your work at first. All you're going to do is keep refining it and keep like refining your style. You can just keep making and making stuff and outputting stuff. And because of the ability for people to find your work now, it could be 10 years down the line, all of a sudden someone finds you and they're like, oh my gosh, this artist is amazing, and he has this huge catalog of work. Like the artist Daniel Johnston, he made a bunch of tapes like in his basement on all these recordings, and he wasn't that popular at first, and all of a sudden people started getting him and he blew up, and he's like this kid that has all these tapes, and he became this big sensation because he was like a best kept secret, like a gem in the desert. So just keep making stuff and keep refining your style, and even if you don't become popular or make money off of it, work at McDonald's and keep making music, and maybe some people will visit you at McDonald's, you know?
So it's faith and patience, it sounds like, and a willingness and stubbornness. And being able to play well with others.
Definitely.
Yeah. Do you have
I guess
any
cartoonists are kind of shy.
What did you say?
It's very quiet. Come on, you guys. If Linda Berry were here, you guys would be dancing.
Do you have any questions for each other?
I have a question for Matt.
Yes.
Well, it's not a question. I just want you to tell us a little bit about the Roz Talks Manifesto.
The Roz Talks Manifesto, very quickly. When I moved to Los Angeles, I started hanging out with a bunch of weirdo creative types from all over the country, and one of them was an artist named Gary Panter, who has done a lot of very distinctive work sort of out of the punk era. There was a very famous iconic poster logo of the punk band The Screamers that he designed. A brilliant drawer. And he made up a manifesto called the Roz Talks Manifesto, and I think Roz Talks is some kind of sound effect. I'm not sure exactly, but it was basically sort of a punk variation on some of the idealistic stuff we set up here about how to maintain enthusiasm and do work. And as he said, and the thing that stuck with me, there are no talent scouts. You got to get it out. You got to push your work. You got to get it out there. And you can find the Roz Talk, ROZZ space Tox, TOX, short for Toxin, is all over the internet. So.
Did you guys write it together, or was it just Gary?
No, it was just Gary.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you guys wrote it together.
No, okay. It was Gary Panter, another artist, and me, and we used to sit in a little burger place. We had so little money that we would pool our money and split a burger 3 ways. And Astro Burger.
Next to Paramount.
On Melrose. And Gary and I talked about our goal was to invade pop culture. And Gary did it by being one of the designers of Pee-wee's Playhouse, which Craig did animation for. And I did The Simpsons and that stuff. And then and the third guy said, "You guys are sellouts. I am not going to do that. I am going to wait until a beautiful woman comes to my door and takes my art and represents me, and she will marry me, and we'll have a great life." And all that. It didn't happen. So he works at a. Steve, you'll like this. He works at a library, and he loves pronouncing it library.
But the basic tenet of the Roz Talks Manifesto was kind of invade pop culture.
I think that was maybe a subtext.
Okay.
It's kind of arcane. It's yeah. And the thing about Gary Panter is, if you read his stuff, his comics and stuff, it's really it's very fragmented and fractured, and kind of hard to get into. And then he is a normal human being who's articulate and can express himself very clearly. But when he does, his art is very consistently weird. Very good, great artist. His comic strip Jimbo is a classic.
Gary is the founder of the Raggedy Line School.
Yeah.
And Pee-wee's Playhouse was Gary and Rick Heitzman and Wayne White. The 3 of them were the production designers. Wayne and Rick worked for Gary. And all 3 of them were Raggedy Line artists. And they drew the funkiest, show designs of all time. I can tell you, because I saw them. And you just couldn't believe that they made an actual TV show from that stuff. And that was, ironically, my introduction to Hollywood. And nothing has even resembled what they were doing since. I didn't realize that I had just gotten there, so I thought, oh, this is how we do TV here. But they were doing a really weird outsiders, kind of design. It was really cool and inspiring.
And let me just give a shout out to Wayne White. Wayne White does different kinds of art, but one of the things he does is he buys prints from thrift stores of very generic landscape paintings, and then he paints signage on them.
Huge kind of super graphic words.
Yeah. And he's got a whole book of it. It's called "Maybe Now I'll Get the Attention I So Richly Deserve."
Well, we're about out of time, and I want to thank you all for coming here today and telling us these great stories and advice. I think the thing that I'll remember is that there are no talent scouts. Is that really true? No talent scouts.
They're not beautiful.
They're not. They're not coming to your door to get all your work. But thank you all for coming, and I think we have some little gifts for you. But let's have a round of applause for our panelists. Thank you very much.
So I want to thank our panel. Going to take a cue from our panel. All projects should have an end, and they should all end well. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ruth, for being willing to facilitate. Steve, Megan, Tommy, Drew, Matt, Craig, thank you very much. This concludes this session. We do have a couple of announcements. Please join us in Library 4300. We have wine tasting